Good evening, everybody. My name is Oyindamola, and today I'll be discussing Solidity access control. So let's get right into it. Um, First of all, let's talk about Solidity access control. I mean, access control in smart contract generally. So access control is incredibly important in smart contracts. It means who is allowed to call certain functions. For example, who can mint tokens, transfer funds, vote on proposals, freeze transfer, and many other things. If access control is not efficient enough, it could cause a loss of funds. This is why it is critical to understand access control implementation. So basically, what this is telling us is that access control is the is like the role, or let me say the control that the user have, the control that you give to people that are interacting with your smart contract. So, and it's a very delicate concept, and one needs to be very very careful the kind of access that we give to um the users and people who have access to some functions of our smart contract to avoid to avoid security issues in smart contracts. Okay, so I'm just going to dive into the measures, solidity access control measures. So number one, we have ownable. So ownable is most fundamental form of access control, and this means that there is like an account or address which is the owner of the contract, and this particular account or address only can do administrative tasks on the smart contracts. This measure is perfect for contracts that have a single administrative users. So I'm sure most of us must have heard about ownable, only owner, in smart contract or in smart contract development generally. And ownable is one of the open Zeppelin contracts that we used mostly in our contracts to for security in the aspect of access, giving access in the aspect of access control. So this is one of the most common. We all familiar with it, I'm sure. And it can only be used is majorly useful for people for contract that has one admin, that has a single person admin. So that person or that address or that account is the only account that have the admin role, or that is authorized to perform administrative tasks on the smart contract. So, like I said, ownable contract is one of the Open Zeppelin contract. So, Open Zeppelin has a ownable contract which has the access control mechanism. This Open Zeppelin ownable contract can be inherited in your contract. This is how you can use it in your contract. When you go to Open Zeppelin GitHub, you can, you know, check the contract. So how to use Open Zeppelin Ownable? So you inherit the contract, you inherit the smart contract to implement this access control mechanism by adding the only owner modifier in the function. That is, you are going to be there is a modifier in the ownable contract which is called only owner. So what this modifier does is that it restricts access to a function to the function that has the modifier only owner. Let me take that again. So what this only owner does is that it restricts access. It restricts access to a function that has the modifier only owner. So this means that it is the only owner, or the admin, this single admin, that can access that particular function that has the only owner modifier. So if someone that is not the admin, or probably another strange address, try to interact with the function, it will throw an error message. It will not work. So with the example below is an example of ownable contract implementation. So looking at the code that we have here, we are importing the Onemwood also contract from Open Zeppelin, and uh, we are trying to set the name. We have this variable string and symbol, and we are trying to set the name and also the symbol. Well, these two functions have only owner modifier. So what this is telling us is that only the person that owns this contract can set name and set the symbol. If another person comes in to try to set the name and symbol, it will not work. And that is if the functions are public functions for others to see. And the function get name and get symbol does not have the only owner, which means that anybody can interact with these functions without any restriction. So a new person or a new user or a strange user can, click function get name and get symbol to get the name and the symbol that the only owner set in the first two functions. So this is a typical example of how to use ownable. So all you need to do is just put the only owner in the functions that you want to restrict access to. So moving on, we have another one called role-based access control. So this type of access control can be used in situations where the different level of authorizations are needed. That is contract that has multiple roles. So this type of access control can be used where you have different rules for different purpose and for different people. So role-based access control is quite flexible in regards of setting different rules, each of which will be able to make various set of actions. So that's what I just said earlier, that these roles have different actions that they perform. They have different they have different access they have different role access. So such as using the only admin role in some places and only moderator role in others. So for example, let's say we have only member also as a modifier in our role based access control, right? So and then you have a function that you want only the members to call. You don't want you it's just for the members, then you put only members there. So from this explanation here, we can see that we have two examples, such as only admin role and only moderator role. So what this is trying to say is that the role of the admin is different from the role of the moderator. So you can only put only moderator role in a function where you only need the moderator to have access to and not the admin. Or well, the admin can also have access to it, depends on how the contract owner wants it. And also the admin role, you put the only admin role to the function where you only need the admin to access, the function where you only need the admin to access, and probably you don't want the moderator to have access to that particular function, then you restrict it to only admin. So you will be able to determine rules for how account can be appointed a role, transfer, and more separately. Okay. Okay. So next we have access control dot so. So we have this particular file in Open Zeppelin which is called access control dot so. It's one of the access control smart contract that we have from that we have in Open Zeppelin. So basically, this access control does so provide so role based access control mechanism for each role that you want to define. You will need a new role identifier that is used to grant or revoke or check if an account has that role. So personally, I call it double layer access control. Okay, so for example, let's say you have multiple roles, right? And you have let's assume you have a user and you only want okay. So now let's assume you have um let's assume you have like students. Yes, let's assume you have students, and then you give them test, and then you want to change their role based on their mark, based on their score, right? So then probably you get the scores and you have the list of students that you want to change their roles. Let's say for example you want to pick prefect, right? And you already done the grading and you have the list of students, let's say 10 students that you want them to be prefect, that you want to choose as prefect, right? So now you have a function in your smart contract that says that that says prefect roles or change to prefect role or become prefect. So then you need to have like a check to confirm that the person clicking that role is a student, not a teacher, or not the principal, or not the security man, right? So that means there is like a standard there's a like standard standard role for everybody, right? And you want to change the role, then you need to check if the person is as the initial role, that is the fundamental role, before they can change their role. So this that is why I call it like a double layer control. So for example you have a default admin role, default admin, to be able to, yes, like I said. So let's assume that this default admin is called student role. Let's just assume that to be, so they have to be a student to be able to use the other role that you want to create, right? Which is a new role that needs to be created. So you need to be a member. Okay, let's just take the example as it is to avoid confusion. Sorry. So for example, we have a default admin role called admin default admin. To be able to use this role, you need to be a member of the community. This means that a new role identifier only member needs to be created, right? Like I just said with the student example. So the student needs to be okay, sorry, the person that wants to call the role or the particular function needs to be the needs to be a student. So likewise here too, this means that a student role identifier only member needs to be created. So that means the only person that can have this role should be a member. So if someone that is not a member cannot have cannot get the default admin role. So now let's look at this code. Yes, so we have contract, community, which is inheriting access control from Opus and Berlin, and then you pass in an address called root. So what this root means is that this person is the first address that that got changed to admin role. So then you have the only member modifier restricted to members of the community. So function is member is doing the check if the address or the person calling or the user calling that particular function belongs to the community or not, like I explained earlier. So if the person does not belong to the community, it will not the person will not get the admin role, the default admin role. So but if it is true, that's why we have a boolean here. So if it is true, it will return as role default admin then the account. So it will definitely change the person to admin role. Sorry. So now adding a member of the community. So to add a member of the community, to add a member of the community, you have to be an admin yourself. So let's assume that okay, one of the 10 students, let's say we have like 5 students that already checked and changed their role to prefect, and they want to like add another person, or they want to add another person, one of the remaining five. So the person that wants to give the role must be an admin, must be a prefect, sorry, must be a prefect already. So someone that is not a prefect cannot just add someone to be a prefect, right? So that is what the function add member is trying to do. So once so it can only be called, can you see? It can only be called by only member. This function can only be called by only member. So that means you need to be a member. And so if it can only be called by only member, so that means automatically it can be called by someone that is already an admin. Because someone that is already an admin automatically is a member, right? So then sorry, sorry, to remove oneself as a member of the community. So this does not require any modifier. It doesn't need any modifier because you can easily just renounce yourself by clicking leave community, which means that if you are leaving the community, you need to be a member of you need to be an admin to be able to renounce the role. So the code above explains that there's a single row there, uh admin, default admin role. We also have the only member, which is like a requirement, it's like the basic, a requirement for anybody to want to change role. So we only have the new role as admin role. So now the address passed on to the constructor is the first account being granted the role. Yes, I think I explained that. And also anyone that role can grant it to others. So it's like, you had it probably you had it yourself, then you had somebody, then the person have access to, can also add other people like that. So then users need to be a member to be granted the role, exactly. And also roles can't be revoked from a different account, but account can renounce to a role they hold. Okay, so what this is saying is that we cannot have, like I said, we cannot have like someone that is not part of the community to leave the community, or someone that is not a member, or someone that is not an admin by default cannot change cannot leave the community. You need to be a member to be able to, call the function. So users can leave the community by renouncing their roles. So yeah. Then yeah, okay. So in conclusion, access control is one of the most important security concerns in smart contracts, which makes it critical to have a good understanding of the different access control mechanism. There are other concepts of access control, such as granting and revoking rules, like I explained earlier. You still have more in terms of hierarchy, the hierarchy of rules, and also querying privileged accounts. So it's useful to have any of these access control measure in place for security on your smart contract. And also you need to consider their usage with the codes if they are absolutely necessary. So this is bringing us back to the default admin. So you need to be very, very careful and you need to have like a good understanding of access control so before you start using it, because there are different ways to use the access control so file, and they are risky, and you really need to have a good understanding so that you don't mess the contract up. So this brings me to the end of my presentation. I hope you all learned something from from the presentation today. So thank you very much and God bless.